te escuchan en estos minutos.
Okay, well, hi everyone. My name is Jaime Panique Galvez. I'm a researcher here, Center of Research in Environmental Geography. Today we're hosting an invited seminar by my friend and colleague, Dr. Dimitrios Zikos. I guess you must have already seen the title of his talk is about institutional analysis, which is a very important topic that we don't have yet in our postgraduate program here at SIGA, so we thought it would be really interesting. I don't think there are many things either at the postgraduate program in sustainability science. So in order to contribute to that gap, we thought that it would be nice to have like an introductory session on the topic, thinking of its usefulness for both environmental geography and sustainability science students. I wanted to introduce properly Dimitrios because I must have received by now the invitation. Very good to see the short bio. But I would say just that we're friends from quite a few years now, from the time I was doing a PhD. He was an early postdoc in Germany, and ever since we've met several times, mostly in collective economic conferences. And in the last few years, we've begun looking for a partner. And he's now a collaborator in my PAPI project. So this area actually is framed in the context of that project, and we're building on an agreement between SIGA, SNAM, and HTW-Berlin, and in order to pursue several activities from research projects and research outputs to students co-supervision, invited lectures, seminars, and several outreach activities as well. So I think I will leave it here, and without further ado, Dimitrios, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Jaime, for the introduction, and thank you for being here, specifically due to the university here that I can bring to you, but also and thank to all the others that joined us tonight. It's the second time actually that I'm here, and I'm quite confident that it is not the last one. The first one, we played a game on sustainability, touching upon issues of sustainability, of course, and sustainable development goals, and so on and so forth. But a game that both Jaime in his classes and in my classes in economics, I have quite extensively used, as there is a number of issues that they transcend a certain disciplinary field, and they are equally relevant to many. And this is actually the bridging point between what we did last year and what I'm going to discuss with you now, namely the process of institutional analysis. This is something, however, that I wouldn't like to present it as a standalone, as just a tool that you can use, and that it is indeed useful in many different disciplinary fields in social sciences and humanities specifically. I want to position it a little bit, to position it within the broader field of economics, and specifically no, but it was working before. Why? Sorry for this.
No.
It doesn't. There is. Huh? Yeah. So while we're waiting for this technical problem to be resolved, I can tell you very, very quickly a couple of things. I mean, I guess you know them, as Jaime said. I'm a professor of development economics at HTW-Berlin. And don't let this title of being an economist alienate you, because although I was trained originally as an economist, statistics in economics, that was something that I literally hated. I really liked it. So my master's was on environmental management, and my PhD was mostly on issues of political economy, water governance, conflicts on water, European legislation in relation to water, and so on and so forth. It was only after I finished my doctoral degree, and while I was doing my habilitation, my postdoctoral research in Germany, that I started working on issues on economics again. And the reason was that only then I really understood the meaning of economics, yeah? And this is, no, I did something.
Let's have a little back. Just click and.
But back it goes. Ah, okay. Good. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so that would be the agenda that of the topics that we're going to touch upon today, with the purpose of positioning a little bit the institutional analysis into the wider frame of institutional economics. Institutional economics, in few words, I will say something more, but just as a teaser, an institutional economist, as a friend and colleague of mine has put it, institutional economist is the guy that when he finds or she finds himself or herself in a setting of economists, he would be labeled as political scientist, while if he finds himself in a setting with political scientists, he would be named the economist. Okay, so it's a little bit heterodox school of thought in economics, not the traditional thing. And this would mean that we go an even step back, discussing a little bit what economics actually is. Yeah? And this would lead us to the analytical frameworks, which are those frameworks that are used to conduct an institutional analysis. And then I will finish with an empirical example of a research that I did together with a student of mine on Pakistan and sustainable cotton farming, where I will show you what institutional analysis is. Hopefully, by that point, you will see that this is something that the traditional mainstream economist would never name an economic analysis. Yeah? So, beginning. Is there someone, either from you or from the attendants online, with a background in economics? Not really. Okay. Is there someone who finds economics really boring?
Yeah.
I know. But is there someone that finds them really fascinating? No. Okay, that's good, because this is, I mean, that was the reason that I disliked economics in the beginning. Yeah, there is this misconception that economics is all about numbers, is all about those boring curves that they go like this. Yeah, and it is all about explaining what it is going to happen in a very complicated way that only few people can understand. Yeah, okay. That's not economics. I'm sorry to say, but this is not economics. Yeah. Although most of us, including myself, first of all, we are trained to think this is economics. Yeah. Wow. Very, very complicated, numerical, quantitative discipline, and so on. It is not. And that's why I want to begin from the very, very basic stuff, what economics is. First of all, economics, that's one of the rare times in life where I can proudly also say that, you know, I'm Greek, so I originate from Greece, and therefore I can understand this word here, which is economia, which is the economics in Greek, that comes literally from two words, ikos, which means house, and nomos, which means law, rule. Yeah. So what it actually means, the word, it is, or it can be named as the rules of good housekeeping, the rules of the house. This is what economics means. And what economics is, and I find this quite old definition as quite nice, is the science which studies human behavior. So this is what it studies, behavior, as a relationship between ends, what you want to achieve, yeah, with this decision that you will make, yeah, and scarce means, yeah. In other words, you don't have unlimited resources, you have a certain target, and you have to make a choice how to use those resources to reach the particular target. Yeah. So again, in other words, the fact that you two are here, for instance, it was an economic decision that you made. Yeah, you chose, given the scarce means that you have, time, effort, money, and so on, you choose to come here. Similarly, those that they joined us online, they made a similar economic choice. And those that they didn't come, they did so as well. So, without wanting to delay too much here.
I have a doubt there.
Yeah.
What would be then, in theory, the difference between economics at large and behavioral economics?
Behavioral economics is a part of economics, is a way of approaching this kind of economic questions.
But I mean, given that definition, at the end of the day,
everything is behavioral.
Yeah.
Yes, it boils down to behavior. Yeah, behavioral economists made the very wise choice to put the title behavior in front. But I will reach this point actually in a minute with a quite nice, I find it quite nice and comprehensive table on economics, yeah, and main differences. So if I move further, I give you here half a dozen definitions. Yeah, I could give you another half a dozen. It doesn't make any difference. But the fact is that in all those, no matter if you are a very hardcore orthodox economist like Samuelson, yeah, or a natural scientist like Robbins, the first definition that I showed you, at the end of the day, and that's the point here, we're talking about social sciences that they study human behavior and the way that humans or societies as a whole choose to do this instead of that and allocate their limited resources in a certain way. To go back at the very, very starting point of the rules of good housekeeping, yeah, let's assume that we don't have running water from the tap all day, but we have a tank. And this tank has a capacity 3,000 liters of water. Yeah? And you have few hours of water per day that allows you to fill the tank. Then in your house, you have to choose what you will do with these 3,000 liters of water. Washing dishes, drinking, cooking, washing clothes, watering the garden, keeping some for whatever purpose. Yeah, that's an economic choice. Now, something else which tends to be forgotten, and it is accepted no matter your approach in economics. What economics do as a science is that tries mostly to address three basic sets of questions. The what, the how, and for whom. What goods and services should be produced in a whole economy? Yeah. So should it be agriculture, manufacturing, services? Should we invest as a society our resources to sports, to leisure, to housing? Yeah. So what to produce? How to produce it? Should it be something labor intensive, land intensive, capital intensive? Do we care about efficiency? Those are questions, I remind you here. They are not given because there is again the tendency that, yeah, of course, efficiency is the most important thing. It is not. Yeah, that's a question that you address. And then for whom? Who will get at the end of the day those things that an economy will produce? Would it be an even distribution? Would it be more for the rich? More for those that they work hard? More for those that they are in need? Yeah, all those are questions. However, going a little bit back, because I find it interesting, this is Adam Smith, the guy who is considered the father of mainstream economics of today. And he's a widely misquoted figure, I dare say. Yeah, because what he says is that economics is the branch of the science of a statesman or legislator with the objective of providing plentiful revenue or subsistence for the people and to supply the state with the revenue for the public services. Yeah, this is the value of economics according to Adam Smith. Most likely you have associated him with all those discussions about privatization, yeah, and the reduced role of the state, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's not what he claims. Yes, he also claims that humans act into their own self-interest. Yeah, and that at the end of the day, if each one of us tries to achieve the best for himself or herself, then the sum of all those efforts would be the best for the society. Yeah, that's true. However, he was not the first. And you can select amongst numerous figures in human history that they dealt with economic questions, although it was not named economics back then, dating since the very, very dawn of time. And again, using my background here, I choose Plato, yeah, the Greek philosopher. By the way, all the philosophers all the economists until 100 years ago or so, maybe even less, they were philosophers, by the way, including Adam Smith. Yeah. He makes some really interesting, in his work, some really interesting assertions that you can find quite contemporary even today. For example, when he talks about the role of economics into conflicts, like here. Yeah, the body and its desires are the only cause of wars and factions and battles. For all wars arise for the sake of gaining money, and we are compelled to gain money for the sake of the body. We are slaves to its service. And so because of all these things, we have no leisure, no philosophy. And this is something that I like even more when I put it in a conflict or cooperation setting, which is a part of my own research as well, where in his work, The Republic, he puts two guys discussing, and one says, and the territory, I presume, that was then, in the old times, sufficient to feed the then population, from being inadequate, will become too small. Is that so or not? Yeah. You can name it growth, if you like. It is. Then we shall have to cut out a part of our neighbor's land, if we are to have enough for pasture and plowing, and they, in turn, of ours, if they too abandon themselves to the unlimited acquisition of wealth by no small increment, but by a whole army that will march forth and fight it out with the assailants in defense of all our wealth and the luxuries we have just described. So if you put those different ways of looking at an economy, you can see some basic differences between the approaches. Yeah, Smith would argue that economics is all about reproduction, all about growth. So how a society organizes its activities in order to produce as much as possible of the surplus, what is needed for reproduction, more than that, as possible. While for Plato, yeah, come on. Yeah, it stacks sometimes, yeah. Well, for Plato, the whole discussion would be as a means to create a just society. And for Smith, the division of labor gives rise to the institutions, rules, we'll reach this point, of private property, of market, of competition, as means to coordinate activities. While for Plato, it would be something that gives rise to communalism, not communism, communalism, sharing and cooperation. Now, why I make this, and here we go to your point, Jaime, because on those two different traditions, today we do have dozens of different schools of thought, if you want, in economics. From the typical mainstream neoclassical way, like here, to the less orthodox or heterodox school of thoughts like behavioral or institutional or Keynesian economics. As you will see, for instance, there is a very nice distribution here. The economy is made up of individuals, as neoclassical economics would argue, classes, as Keynesians would argue, individuals as well as institutions, as institutional economics would say, or in a behavioral school of thought, individuals, organizations, and institutions, as an example. Similar with other domains in economics, like what they are individuals. Are they selfish? Are they rational? Or actually not so? Yeah, and so on and so forth. And this brings us to this point here, what someone would name orthodox mainstream economics, while here we have economics of today, neoclassical economics. Some that they are towards the borders, but still they are considered well accepted and hence mainstream, like behavioral economics, or others more heterodox, but not being too far away from the mainstream. And here you can find ecological, feminist, institutional, evolutionary, and so on, so forth. So, in a way, wrapping up.
Economics
not really. Not really. I mean, here we could also discuss about this kind of, for example, environmental, energy, water economics, and so on and so forth. Actually, they are not different ways of thinking or approaching economic questions, but they are economics, no matter how you approach them, yeah, that they deal with a very specific domain, be it the environment, or for instance, be it energy, or be it water. Yeah, but here you can have someone approaching environmental questions through ecological economics or through 100% mainstream neoclassical and so on. And still both they will be working on environmental economics.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my point was, I mean, environmental economics would be well within the mainstream. Not intersecting.
Definitely.
Further
yes. Yeah. Exactly. So environmental economics could very well be here, but very well could be there as well. Yeah, depending how you will approach the questions there. Okay, so the point here that I want to make at the end is that yes, we are all trained to believe, to a large extent, that we are here. Yeah? But this is not necessarily so. Actually, there is a second reason that I can quickly say why I like using this graph. Because Colander, this guy, he recognized, he identified studying economists, yeah, influential economists in the terms of gaining a Nobel Prize or working in a very renowned international organization and so on so forth, that they became influential while they were moving here. Yeah? No matter how they ended up, there are examples of people starting here, becoming famous, and then being there. Yeah? Or others that they started here, and they only became influential when they reached that point here. Yeah? But the point again here, which is very interesting, is that it is a depiction of, yes, regardless what we are trying to believe that, okay, this is how it is, actually, the real progress on the field and the question and the interest and the influential people will be somewhere there. Yeah. And here we have intersection between those different traditions. Are we alone? Are we a member of the society? To what extent this is important or that is important? And wanting to move towards the institutional analysis part, I will first go to institutional economics. And very quickly, what institutional economics is. As the name suggests, it explores institutions. Yeah, that is the center. And we'll say what institution means. It rejects all those invisible hands and other inexplicable, nearly magical processes, yeah, that influence economic interactions, the decisions, and the outcomes. There are no such things. The markets are not godly entities, yeah, that they must be protected and they exist no matter what and so on, but they are results of complex interactions of different institutions. Economics cannot be separated from the political, ecological, and social systems, yeah. And they put emphasis on property rights, different types of goods, regulation of behaviors, interactions, transactions between those different systems, and so on and so forth. And it used to be, and still is, a leading school of heterodox economics. There is a very interesting story that I want to share with you, okay, some emblematic figures. It was a leading school in the US academia as well, until a little bit after the Second World War, the First World War, okay. And they rely on four main theses, if you like, that makes them distinctively different from, at that time, very popular Marxist economics, as well as the neoclassical ones. The first one is that the social structures in any society are completely dependent on individuals. And individuals, and their actions as well, intentionally or not, form, reproduce, change, confirm, reaffirm, transform, or destroy those social structures. Without individuals, social structures don't exist. At the same time, however, and as the social structures depend on individuals, the individuals are completely dependent on the social structures. Yeah, they don't also exist by themselves, regardless what. And this creates certain interdependencies between the two, and interactions between them, resulting in an evolutionary and not stable economic behavior. Individualism, which is so central in mainstream economics, is rejected. Yeah, no, we are not individuals, we are members of a society. But in the same way, the collectivist approach of Marxist economics are equally rejected. Yeah, because yes, the social structures are recognized and they are important, but they cannot exist without the individuals. Yeah. It is quite interesting that, that despite their popularity during the time, they ended before the Second World War, becoming a marginalized niche in economics. That was for the following reasons. First of all, deliberately, what I was telling you in the beginning about numbers, for instance, they failed to produce mathematical and econometric models explaining what's going on. Yeah, and during the time, that was particularly popular. The fact that they failed to do so, combined with Wall Street crash, financial crisis, and Soviet Union, focusing on Marxist economics, made the approaches of neoclassical economics much more attractive to policymakers mostly, as well as to economic theorists. And therefore, neoclassical economics become the mainstream that we still face until more or less today. There is a paradox here that neoclassical economists of the time, they accepted that the importance of institutions in any economy, of rules in any economy, is very, very important. Yet, they rejected institutionalism as a whole, arguing that this is something that cannot be quantified. This is something, and therefore, rather unscientific. And therefore, it is beyond the scientific boundaries of economic theory. So yes, it is important, but we cannot include it in our models, so we better close our eyes and ignore them altogether. However, since the early 90s, again, and the fall of the socialist world, to put it like this, institutional economics gained a new momentum. And indeed, as early as in the 90s, there were already two institutional economists that won the Nobel Prize in economics, followed by others later on. Yeah. They were rebranded as new institutional economics, and they started gaining popularity again. This created two subdivisions, if you like, classical institutional economics and new institutional economics. Classical, those that they rely on the institutional economics as they were originally developed. New, as they were modified, if you like, adapting few propositions by neoclassical economics and rebranded as new. There are some differences there, but the important is how you understand institutions, how you understand the rules. Yeah, what you would do if you decide as an institutional economist or as whatever else, to conduct an institutional analysis. What are institutions? In the traditional institutional economics, they are enablers of realms of choice. They are those rules that they will enable you to do something. In the new institutional economics is again those things, but this time that they will constrain you from doing something. You want to do something, but you're not doing it because there is a certain rule there that doesn't allow you to do so. What are they? Again, different definitions, but largely, this is the one that I like following, for instance, by Vatn, environmental economist as well, and ecological economist as well. What are they? They are the conventions, the norms, as well as the formally sanctioned rules of a society. So not only the rules that are on paper, but the rules like a convention, the language, or the norm, what is expected you to do or not to do in a society. Shaking hands. Am I allowed to touch you or to hug you or to kiss you or not? Yeah? And what they do, they provide expectations, stability, and meaning, which is important, not just important, essential to both human existence, but coordination of actions as well. So in other words, institutions regularize life, support values, and produce as well as protect interests. Yeah? So institutions are rules, being formal, a law, or informal, like a behavioral norm. Yeah? With this purpose. What is the problem if you do not understand institutions? Okay, one typical problem is that you write a bad paper or a really bad thesis. That's for sure. But there's a much more important problem here. Institutions is a term that they appear in everyday life, especially in terms of those big international organizations, IMF, World Bank, OECD, and so on and so forth. Yet, there is a problem. They are using this term without having a certain meaning. And as Bromley puts it, since the Washington Consensus of the 90s, the acute social, economic, and environmental problems of Nigeria and Senegal were suddenly transformed into a problem of not having the same institutions as Norway and Sweden. As the latter have X institutions in place and they are rich and prosperous, then the only action that Senegal and Nigeria needs to do is to have the same institutions. Now, this had a very important consequence. First of all, international aid was transformed to support for institutional reforms and changes. Okay, but as we already very quickly said now, institution is not just a law. And even if it is just a law, it doesn't mean that this law will indeed regularize human behavior. Yeah? You can have a law that simply nobody cares and nobody follows. That's not really an institution. That's a piece of paper. Yeah? So, there are three examples, and I won't go into detail into this, but I think that they are quite relevant, both 100% to sustainability, I mean, they are typical examples, but to human environmental geography as well, and they are key, very central into institutional economics as well. One is the process of transforming an economy. The second one is the tragedy of the commons. And the third one is the prisoner's dilemma. Maybe you have heard of them. I won't go into details through them because we don't have much time. How much time will we have, by the way?
It's 10 to 5, so we have still a little bit more than you know.
Okay, oh, good. I'm really happy. Please interrupt me. I mean, if there is something that you want more elaboration or something is unclear or whatever, please don't hesitate to do so. Yeah. I tend to speed up a little bit because that's a very big topic that I would like to cover as many angles as possible as a starting point for those that would be really interesting to dig a little bit deeper. Yeah, but this doesn't mean that I wouldn't happily sacrifice a big part just to discuss something which is unclear or particularly relevant or whatever. Okay. So, transformation of an economy, what this means and why this is relevant. Okay, what we said, not international aid just like that, international aid for institutional reforms. Okay, so the problem there is that, as Bromley and Anderson, for example, argues, is that failures in transformation of dysfunctional economies is due to no evidence whatsoever suggesting a causal link between suggested measures, what I mentioned before, importing in Mexico, for example, in Greece or whatever, the institutions from Norway. Yeah, you take what the Norwegians do and you say, aha, perfect. Let's put it in the Mexican and the Greek context now. And then Mexico and Greece will be, wow, super, they will fly. Yeah, there is no such causal link. Yeah, nothing that suggests this. And they argue that those organizations that they argue for these institutional changes, they simply fail totally to understand how institutions are formed. They don't come in a vacuum. Yeah, they are formed because of this process of individual social structures, how they interact, a whole evolutionary process. Yeah, so how they are formed, how they are produced, how they change and why, how they are confirmed or reaffirmed. And he gives a really, and probably there he gives a really beautiful example of Iraq, of former Eastern Bloc countries, and why the processes failed, exactly because those organizations failed to understand, yeah, why things are as they are and how they can change. An example here that I quite often use, for instance, with my students as well, is that you cannot approach corruption, for instance, the same way that you do in Greece or in Germany. Yeah, there are different rules there in those two cases. For a German, giving, I don't know, a bottle of Uso, I don't know, or 20 euros to my doctor, yeah, it's 100% corruption. Yeah, no way. Yeah, you don't do that. To me, is a way to pay a little bit more someone who's underpaid, for instance. That's the typical, not with doctors, but with state officials. Yeah, I go there to get a paper and I give some money. That's not corruption. However, in order to change this, yeah, it's not the same like in Germany. It is an institution or a behavioral norm in my country because there are certain reasons. Saying that we will both go to prison won't help. That's not the reason why it is there. In Germany, you can say so. You will go to prison, and they will. And it makes sense, because they are not underpaid, for example, state officials. Yeah? Yes?
Therefore, sanctions are very important in institutions, right? I mean, they are actually...
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly, totally, 100%. Exactly, totally, exactly like what you put it, yeah? Because the formal and informal as well, yeah? Again, it plays a role, because in some settings, an informal sanction might be much more important than a formal one. And non-monetary can be more important, yeah? Or even in some cases, and there is a discussion there, a certain uniform penalty for someone breaking the law actually is not fair, and it doesn't help into changing behavior. Getting a speed ticket of 100 euros, that's a sanction, yeah? I break the law, I pay 100. Yes, but it has a totally different actual value for me that I'm a millionaire. I don't care. I can pay 20 tickets per day and I would hardly notice. With someone that doesn't have money to put gas into his or her car. Yeah? And all those play a role. And I think I mentioned somewhere this with the monitoring and sanction for, yes, I do. It's a part exactly of the institutional analysis that someone would conduct. The second one would be the tragedy of the commons. That was something suggested in the 60s, and the premise is simple. Yeah? That if there is an area which is not private and it is not controlled by the state, so in other words, there are no rules, and we all as actors, we try to gain something from this area, yeah, then the system will collapse. And he gave, Harding, the example of pasture. Yeah, there's a common land, pasture land, we all have sheep, whatever, and we send them to graze. Yeah, I see that the land deteriorates. So I think that, okay, maybe it's better not to send my sheep. But if I don't send them, then you will send yours anyway. So actually, the share of the land that I won't use will be used by you. Yeah? So actually, my benefit would be to try and grasp as much as possible, put as many sheep as possible. So at the end of the day, the system will collapse and everyone will lose. Yeah? And Harding suggests that the answer is simple. This common land, you break it into small pieces, and each one of us gets a small piece, which is mine and only mine, and therefore I can protect it. Or the state steps in and says, no, that's not common land, that's state land. And I do the rules. And I say that only you three, you will be grazing. The other two change profession. Yeah, no herders anymore. However, in the 90s, Elinor Ostrom, first female economist that received the Nobel Prize in 2009, on the basis of very rich empirical evidence from all around the world, she said that, you know, no, it's not like that. Not at all. And actually, in most, not all, definitely not all, but in most cases, people, those herders that they have this land, they will come up with their own rules, yeah, to deal with the land. That was, in a way, our first research that we did together in Cyprus with forestry and water, yeah, and so on. And it is interesting that, I don't mention it here, that in cases where Japanese and Swiss from Switzerland, villagers, were given the chance to change the status of their land from being common to privatized, they said no. Totally different traditions, totally different cultural backgrounds, economic, everything. Yeah. Still, they said no. And they said no, apparently not because they were stupid, but because they were working on a setting that it was quite functional. So there was no tragedy of the commons there and no reason to change what they had. Yeah, that's what attracts me quite a lot actually for research here as well. Yeah. And the problem here is that still, and that's why I mentioned that this is a powerful image, like the transformation of an economy, that this is still, despite the scientific evidence, taken as given. To transform an economy, you get the institutions from there and you put them there and okay, everything will work out. And we have to do something because otherwise, in those communities in Mexico, you will have a tragedy of the commons. which might be still the case. Yeah, it's not no, but it's not something deterministic, that as long as that's not the case, then we only expect this to happen.
Allow the narrative to justify it.
Exactly. Exactly. And actually, one of the very interesting criticisms to Hardin work is about basically propaganda. Yeah, so conducting not scientific work, but propaganda in favor of privatization, especially of land and so on. Yeah. And lastly, there's the prisoner's dilemma. Again, quite popular comes from the 60s. And here the idea is the following, that you have two prisoners, you put them in a different cell, and they can choose if they will say that the other one did it, or they will remain silent. If they will cooperate by remaining silent, or if they will defect by pointing the finger to the other. Yeah. And the idea here is that a self-interested actor that tries to maximize his or her own benefit, actually, no matter what, will always choose to defect. The scenario, just very quickly, many of you may know it, but one of the formulation of the scenario is that, okay, you can say the other one did it, or don't ask me, I don't know. Yeah. And they ask the same thing to you in a different room, no communication. And this is what can happen. You have a payoff, to put it in economic terms. You have the following payoff. If you say the other one did it, then you will either set free. Okay, so the other one did it. So we have a witness, you come, the other one goes to prison. Or, and this will happen if the other one remains silent and you say the other did it. Yeah, so sufficient evidence. Or 5 years in case that each other points a finger to the other one. So the police assumes that they are accomplices, 5 years to prison each. Yeah. So if you defect, either 3 or 5 years. If you cooperate, so if you remain silent, if both remain silent, then the police cannot keep them. They put a minor charge, half a year each one in prison. Yeah. But if the other one tells that I did it and I remain silent, I am the guilty one, I go 10 years to prison. Yeah. So the payoff is, I have two choices. Economics is about choices, as we said, with the following payoff. I defect, 0 or 5. I cooperate, half or 10. No question. Yeah, this is better for me. I seek to maximize my benefit, so I will defect. Yeah, I will say that the other one did it. But if the other one is also self-interested and rational, will also choose the best for himself or herself. So he or she will also defect. So actually, no matter what, we'll end up 5 years in prison each. Yeah. And the interesting here is that although my individual optimum is to defect, either 0 or 5, the group optimum for the two of us as a society is to cooperate. Because as a group, if we defect, no matter what, we have 10 cost. If I cooperate, and we both cooperate, then we have just 1. Yeah? And interestingly, again here, it was argued that this is what will always happen. And indeed, this is what a computer would decide. However, in numerous experiments, it was found that no, that's not the case. And even subtle differences that I play this game with my student mates. So I know that I know them. I don't know who, but I know them. Yeah? Might make a difference, indeed. And the players might decide, even without communication, to cooperate. And Ostrom again here argues, according to empirical evidence, that yes, this model works. Only, this has to do with the narrative that you were saying as well, only if they treat themselves as their prisoners, and this is their only choice. So the only thing that I can do, because I'm rational and I must be rational and I must be social, I must choose to defect. Yeah, only then this happens, she argues. And if they actually overcome obstacles by communication, by teaming up with other cooperative players, and so on, by agreeing on rules, changing the incentives, and so on and so forth, actually, the level of cooperation is much higher. Yeah? And those are some questions that, yes, they are at the very center of institutional economics, for instance, but they are very popular in other disciplinary fields as well. And you already mentioned, yeah, that this is something quite typical in Mexico and so on, that you face, as I know, quite often into your research as well. Okay, assuming now that I have positioned it a little bit, yeah, what economics is as a whole, what institutional economics is as a branch or a certain school of thought of rather heterodox economics, what institutions are, and how they relate with those powerful images, let's go to the analytical frameworks. As I said in the very, very beginning, institutional economics, first of all, claim that you cannot separate the social system from the ecological system, from the economy, from politics. And those can be depicted in various ways. I just choose, for instance, one here. Yeah, I just choose one here. And that I have set it up in an island setting because the biophysical borders are clearer there. You do have an ecological system where there is an ecosystem which can be divided, for instance, if we are discussing for farming, yeah, into an agroecosystem, into the broader landscape, which is a part of an even broader watershed, for instance. And then you have a social system where here you have a small farming system, a certain farm could be, the community of farmers, and the whole society into this island as a whole. Yeah, this is again not in a vacuum, but you have, yeah, the wider system. Now those two interact with each other. No matter what modification you will do here, it will definitely have an impact there, positive or negative. And whatever change occurs here, in turn, it will affect that one. Yeah? So they are not stable, they are dynamic, and they are interacting. And in between those, how those exchanges will be regulated, if you like, by the institutions in place there. Am I allowed to do so? Being in terms of a law that doesn't allow me to do so, or an agreement that I have with my neighbor, or the fact that, I don't know, the trees in my farm were planted by my grandfather and I simply don't like to cut them down. It can be whatever, yeah? But there are certain institutions there that they will regulate the interactions between the two. This is quite generic. There are quite several depictions. But one of the most popular recent, that's another one, yeah, where basically you have the same idea, but depicted differently. Yeah, you do have a human system, you do have an ecological system, there are interactions between the two, this one affecting that one, and that one affecting that one.
Excuse me, the previous one is based on the sustainable livelihood.
That one, yeah.
In there, just thinking, no, the previous one.
Yeah.
What about the external institutions?
Yep.
I think they are also important.
Yeah.
Local institutions.
Yeah.
External.
Definitely they are, because again, you cannot, I mean, one of the main criticism on Ostrom, for instance, yeah, it was that she focuses only at a very, very local level. And it is true that the local community, being the Japanese or the Swiss farmers that I was saying before, they might have found a very nice balance into this very small bubble. Yeah, but one of the criticisms is that, okay, but what happens if the Swiss government decides that this way of, I don't know, using land is not allowed anymore? That would be an external. Or, yeah, it doesn't need to be a regulation like this, but gives permission to a multinational company, yeah, to open there and start using the resources from the ecosystem as well. Yeah, so everything it is totally forgotten. I like this, for instance, sorry, and that's why I defined it as an island as well, because usually, and that's a super interesting concept as well, because islands can choose to remain dislocated from the rest of what's going on outside them. Yeah, there is this concept of Icelandness, which is interesting, which argues that no matter if they are a part of a country, actually they are not. If they don't like the external institution, they will never follow it, and nothing will happen. Yeah. But what? Wait. No. Yeah. But exactly because of that reason, I choose to stick into this. Yeah, one of the most popular and the one that I will use also later on into the following up institutional analysis example. Yeah, so here basically again the idea is the same. Yeah, you do have here a more social one, you have here the more ecological one. You do have here the interactions and the outcomes that they occur between the two, but you do have a broader set of related ecosystems outside of this small one, as well as a broader social, economic, and political setting. Yeah, so it's not only what happens here, but it's also what comes from the outside. Yeah, here, just using your example, it could be very well that as a small community, we have found the perfect way to deal with the use of the water of our part of the river that crosses our community. And we are perfect. Yeah, the best. Unfortunately, yeah, upstream, there is a new, I don't know, polluting industrial facility that it was built. And at the end of the day, no matter what we will do here, yeah, we are in trouble. Yeah, or as we said before, we might have set a very nice set of rules in our small community. Yeah, but there could be a political change, for example, in my country, that will determine as well what I'm allowed to do in my small system and what I'm not. Yeah, and I'm not an island, so I cannot get away with it, for instance.
Let me add
Yes.
some brief notes there. One of the really important insights from political economy that comes from human geography is basically the idea of the need of looking at institutions, not just at the local level, but across scales. No, because decisions at the local level very often are actually determined at higher levels, but institutional at higher levels. No? It's like inside the geography, political economy, and political economy is more environmental geography, sustainability, environmental science. No? So,
And
exactly.
Actually, approximately in research, with many research questions that are about how they use the labor over the
Exactly.
different skills. No?
exactly.
Even for research value or vertical level.
And the use of power.
The power is actually the nature
Mm.
institutions.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
institutions are not necessarily made for the reason of the for everyone. And
Definitely. Yeah.
keep the power.
Yeah.
So that is one very important.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. The interesting thing with this particular framework is that it gives a very detailed breaking down of those different systems that allows researchers working on different disciplines, having different research questions, giving emphasis to different sides, of this, to use a common tool, using a common language that can go across disciplines, across cases, across the resources that they're talking about, and so on. And how it does this? It does this by this. Yeah? So you have, yes, the first tier, which is this big resource system part, but this can be broken down to 9 specific variables, which can be resource system 1, which is the sector, if we're talking about water, forest, pasture, fish, clarity of system boundaries, size of the resource system, human constructed facilities, and so on and so forth. That would be the second tier. And then, and this goes to every one of those boxes, of those parts. So resource system, resource units, users, governance system, setting, and ecosystem. So each one is broken down in different variables. Of course, needless to say, not to scare you off here, that I doubt that there is anybody that has done it in every single one of them. I mean, they are not all relevant for all cases. And also, depending on your questions, you give emphasis to different parts. What is the importance here? The importance here is that those different seemingly dislocated parts. I pressed something or not? Come on, move.
No, use the key.
No, does it work? Yeah. And then you can even break down the specific variables to a third tier of variables. For example, concerning the mobility of the resource units, if they are mobile, or if they are stationary. What is the important, what I started to here, is that those parts, they come together. It's not a catalog. It is not something that you just feel and you say, okay, what we have in the resource systems, is all those things. Let's write them down and I'm good to go. No, because this one, together with that one, it will go to the interaction box that will feed back to here and will lead to certain outcomes which are not only because of that, yeah, but also because of the users that they play in the system, the governance system, and so on and so forth. So actually, you build up a story, if you like, of what is happening in the particular social ecological system that someone is studying. Of course, someone will put, as I said, more emphasis here or there or there or there. Yeah, but the language used, the interactions that are taking place, the outcomes and so on, they will be common. So no matter at the end of the day, if I'm working on political ecology or human geography or institutional economics, as I was saying, yeah, I can still use a common platform to do my research, which would allow, for instance, Jaime to go to my research, yeah, and see what it is happening in my social ecological system, despite the fact that I might put more emphasis here. And I will do the same with yours, despite the fact that you might be put more emphasis there. Let's see. Interestingly, this is economics in the wider sense. Yeah? And let's see.
Dimitri,
Yes.
there was someone that posed a question.
Mm-hmm.
Saying, what about interactions between local communities? I guess that was at the time we're talking about looking at institutions, not just at the local level, but at the scale. They're not sure what she means that.
Yeah, this usually, yeah, would be located there and there. So here is where you're talking about the actors, which can be individuals or whole communities, or there when you're talking, for instance, about network structures, yeah, which can be a network of communities, for instance, and so on and so forth, or as well on, there was another one, governmental, non-governmental organizations, and so on and so forth. Yeah, again, it depends on the level of the analysis that you will choose. It can be a very small community, and you're looking within the community itself, so your social ecological system is much more constrained, or you're looking to a much broader one. Yeah, like the example that I will give, for instance, now. Yeah. And that would be this one. Okay, wait, because I want to take this out. I don't know how it goes out. Let me see.
Can you move the bar upward?
Yeah, I can. Whip. Okay, I took it down. Yeah. Let's see this research, which ended up to a magnificent master thesis that we're looking ways now for publishing it and so on, named as following: integrating a social ecological approach to climate change and sustainable cotton farming in Pakistan. Admittedly, that title was not very accurate because at the end of the day, the climate change was really underplayed as a concept, and we put the emphasis on social ecological approach, system approach, and sustainable cotton farming. Yeah, and the case was in Pakistan. So, what happened there? Oh no, I clicked something that I shouldn't. Okay. So, this research was about exploring, yeah, that was the premise in a way, why adoption of voluntary sustainable standards in cotton farming, specifically in Pakistan, leads to sustainable resource use. Yeah, because there was evidence suggesting that this is the case. The hypothesis there was that social ecological systems in which better cotton farmers, what is better cotton? Better cotton is an organization, a setting of farmers which they an organization which promotes farming that takes place within those voluntary standards. Yeah, the farmers are totally free to choose if they will go for this direction or not. Okay. And the assumption here is that the whole social ecological system that they operate is fundamentally different from that in which conventional cotton farmers are operating. And the objective there was to identify those dissimilarities between the two social ecological systems and try to explain the different outcomes between those different types of farming. Yeah. To a large extent, it would be easy to say that, okay, someone following sustainable farming would be better than someone not doing so. Yeah. But this is very normative. What we mean better? Better in environmental terms, better in economic terms, better for the country, better for the farmer, better for the world. Yeah. So this is what we try to say here, that they are different. Yes, first of all, and that at the end of the day, the results would be sustainable from economic, from social, and from the environmental perspective. Yeah, and explain why this happens. Yeah.
And this is non-genetically modified stuff.
No, no.
Because I think it's worth saying that now there's more cotton.
Yeah. So what you do there in case that you want to conduct an institutional analysis? The first one would be to select the focal level of analysis. So identify those key subsystems, the interactions and the outcomes that they are relevant to our results. What I was telling you, you are not doing everything. Yeah? You have to choose what it is relevant. And in that case, we narrow it down to the evaluation of some additional second-tier variables. Yeah, so within the research system, what are those most important ones? And exploring their interactions in the social ecological system. Yeah, where those voluntary sustainable standards take place. The step 2 would be to select and explore those variables, and the step 3 would be to communicate the results, yeah, the findings, in such a manner that they are comparable with similar studies. What I was saying, that if Jaime reads this thesis, will make sense out of it. Yeah. So, yeah, that's not a good graph, but just to show you, yeah, the process here. So, out of all those variables in the system, be it the setting, social, economic, and political setting, we said, the upper part, or the ecosystem, yeah, the bottom part in the graph that we have, and then the resource systems, governance systems, resource units, actions, and interactions and outcomes. From all the variables, we explore to what extent there are indeed plausible differences between the conventional and the voluntary scheme for sustainable farming. For instance, in the terms of the general political setting, the two systems operate under very similar rules. So there is no appreciable variation. Yeah. To a large extent, the same is with the ecosystem. Yeah, that those farms take place, exist. Those farms are. Yeah. There are, however, some specific areas that you can name as promising. Yeah. And therefore, in this initial table, there are those highlighted, yeah, in yellow, And we indicate that there are potential variations, that according to the literature and so on, we expect some differences. And there are some indicated with an asterisk, which is, again, what similar studies, with similar questions have usually recognized as very important variables. Doesn't mean that it is for ourselves necessarily. We just put a star there to know that, okay, it is worth exploring further. Okay. And then through a process of be it secondary literature or interviews with the different farmers, we try to dig deeper into those different areas. And now here, I could spend a couple of hours discussing about each one of those, but I won't do so, so don't worry. Instead, I will just pick up, cherry pick, if you like, some of those just to highlight some of the findings that we get and some of the results that we conclude. Yeah. So first of all, one of the things that we immediately find there is that indeed between the two different systems, we find, on the basis of secondary, that was not something particularly difficult to identify, that the productivity of the system, which is a variable of the resource system 5 specifically, but as well as the number of the units of the resource exist, were found to be indeed different. Yeah. This is a pretty descriptive one. Useful, but it doesn't really say much. What it says much would be identified mostly in the interaction and in the outcomes domain. So the interactions, for instance, and here I give an example. What we find is that better cotton farmers, so those that they are part of the voluntary sustainable agriculture systems, generally collaborate, that's the variable 2 of the governance system, to create knowledge systems, which is then disseminated to the farmers through activities such as training workshops, which is the governance system variable 3. And in this way, they also share information, which is the variable of interaction 2. And in parallel, principles and criteria in farming, which is again into the governance system 5 variable, are enforced by assurance program, which is the variable 8, which ensure that monitoring activities, interaction 9, and evaluative activities, interaction 10, are in place. Allow me to move. Okay, no, let me not spend time here. And needless to say that here we are talking about, I don't know, around half a dozen of findings in relation to interactions. I just highlight one just to show how you identify this story and the connecting points following this mapping. Yeah. Otherwise, this has to do again with the communicating of results. I could have several pages discussing about the training workshops and how important they are. Yeah. But that wouldn't be a part of an elaborate mapping that would allow me as a reader, you see my point, to understand how they fit into this broader framework. The outcomes are interesting here. Again, the same way in how they are constructed, that what it is observed, a reduced input use, lower cost and higher yield for sustainable farmers. again, how we build the story, that the rules for farming in the sustainable setting, governance system 5, requires annual soil test, which has to be with the actor variable 9. To be conducted for the producer units, and non-compliance of this rule may result in denial of the certification license. Yeah, variable 8. And their input, hence, better cotton farmers, actor criterion 1, apply need-based fertilizers and their input cost is reduced. Outcome 1. The field facilitators and lead farmers, actor variable 1, ensure that farmers are aware of this indicator and farm records are monitored to warrant compliance. Yeah? Again, different findings put in this kind of mapping. Preservation and restoration of environment, yeah, another outcome here. And again, a whole story behind it, yeah, and you can see it. You can see it in the slides as well. I'm not reading from the inside. The point here, again, we do have a number of findings that can be communicated with others. We do have a number of variables that we have explored, putting different emphasis in each one, yeah, according to our initial research question, that allow us to construct a relatively elaborate mapping that at the end will enable us to reach some conclusions. Yeah. And those conclusions are not based only, yeah, I mean, here we can have another discussion on purely quantitative data. Yeah, we've seen how many hectares those guys are doing and what's the production and what's the tons of CO2 emitted compared, blah, 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 which would be interesting, but that would be a purely quantitative part. It's not either a purely qualitative part. Yeah, we interviewed several farmers and the farmers said that this does that and how important the workshop are, yeah, leading to different domains of knowledge, not necessarily communicable, yeah, but a story that allows us to reach this point by mapping those attributes that we're interested in and can be picked up and explored further by others. So, better environmental and economic outcomes generated from adoption of the voluntary systems are explained indeed by the presence of a whole different social ecological systems where those different types of farmers operate. And by saying a social ecological system, please keep in mind that the broader system is not different. What I said about the political one, yeah, the very external one, if you like, and the very ecosystem, very biophysical one is not so different. It's not different, basically. And that's what our second conclusion say, that this difference is mainly attributed to the additional second-tier variables and their interactions mostly, yeah, so not the variables themselves, but their interactions facilitated by the voluntary systems, sustainability systems. The importance of governance systems and related second-tier variables in influencing farmer behavior to achieve sustainable use of resources is of essence. And voluntary-based governance systems enable transfer of knowledge, technology, and we discussed technology as well. I mean, I didn't focus a lot here. Where it was. Here, yeah, technologies available, for instance. Technology, as well as accountability, which ultimately build the capacity of farmers to make informed decisions during critical focal action situations. And lastly, which was a very interesting conclusion and hopefully we'll pick up and explore further, is that role of participation, it was identified the role of participation as a significant drive to sustainability. Yeah, so farmers participate. And what was interesting is that although participation was voluntary, it was observed that elements like knowledge systems and technology influenced this participation. Yeah, so the fact, for instance, that the system itself created those knowledge networks, yeah, made technologies available, yeah, collaborative rules, and so on, positively influenced those that they participate. Yeah, and in my view, at least, this really nicely shows the evolutionary character, if you want, of such a system. Okay, I need some coffee. Yeah, that was it. I hope that we have some time for some discussion.
Yeah. The question here before I will make it in the chat as well. It'd be nice to change now to the participants, but then
Okay, let me see. Yeah, I'm the expert one, you know. Oh, that's me. Okay. Good.
Okay. Were you able to follow more or less?
Yeah, I hope that it was not a.
If you don't have people asking questions, you can provide the station.
Bueno, sí, a mí me gustaría hacer una pregunta, pero la haré en español.
Okay.
Bueno, pues, doctor, muchas gracias por la presentación. Creo que estos marcos siguen siendo muy investigación de ciencia de la sostenibilidad que hacemos. Y la pregunta es, ¿cómo podemos relacionar como estos elementos de los sistemas psicológicos con propiedades emergentes como resiliencia o vulnerabilidad? Si se ha explorado y también cómo se vinculan esos conceptos con esta parte de la economía de instituciones. ¿Ya hay como alguna vinculación?
Okay, tu pregunta entonces, ¿cómo relacionamos esta parte, digamos, más institucional?
Temas ecológicos con vulnerabilidades.
Yeah, so she thanks it in the presentation, says that it is very relevant to the sustainability science. And she would like to know more specifically how this specific SES framework can be related to institutional analysis, specifically in relation to emerging concepts or properties like vulnerability, resilience, these kind of things. Complexity.
Thank you. Okay, so, but why? I'm not doing anything. Okay. Why disappeared? Jaime?
I don't know.
What I did wrong? No signal. Okay, if I take it out and in again.
Perdimos la pantalla con los
Ya acabamos la presentación.
Yeah. The presentation. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. I hope that next time I'm here, I will. Oh, it disappeared again. That next time that I will be here, that I will be able to understand 100% because I understood around 50. But and that's the good with the scientific jargon, that it's quite similar regardless of language. Okay. So, yeah. If you check at the certain outcomes, and that's why I'm saying that one of the values here is that you can focus to different outcomes, for instance, yeah? The outcome 2, which is ecological performance measures, focus specifically on resilience, sustainability, biodiversity, and so on and so forth. But it is explored, as I said before, as the outcome of certain interactions. And those interactions, they take place because of those different actors, units, and na. As an example here, for instance, me as an economist, in the particular work, I was more interested, honestly, to the externalities to other systems. Yeah. So, for example, that you do have the certain setting of farming, sustainable or not, and it definitely produces some, be it positive or negative, externalities to other systems. Yeah, be it an urban area or another farming system, or even in terms of biodiversity, yeah, environment, and so on and so forth. And honestly, I tried to push more the researcher to go towards this direction. Yet, the information that were acquired in combination with his own interest, although it was a master thesis in economics, it resulted most into focusing to the social performance measures. Yeah, so not what I would look as an economist, and actually not yours, which would be focusing more on resilience and so on and so forth, but to a different one, which was more on the societal perspective. It's still fine. A different researcher doing the same research, yeah, could be focusing on different variables, yeah, because what he or she would aim at the end to explore would be mostly the resilience of communities working on cotton farming in Pakistan. Yeah, that would be quite different direction in that case. That would result to picking up different variables there, but again, the language would be similar, and the results would be complementary. So we would have, for instance, me exploring the particular social ecological system, focusing on this type of outcomes, you on those, my student there, and then we have a very nice overall picture of what it is happening. Yeah? It helped?
Okay, there's a question in the chat. Actually, there are two. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. How do you build a network of interaction between social ecological systems? Where the interaction between the different dimensions of the variables reviewed, within brackets, with multiple graphics or something equivalent?
I'm not sure that I got it. Could you repeat, please?
Adrian, can you maybe show on the chat? It might be easier because it's rather long. There are actually like two with one nested question. No,
Here, Barbara.
No, it's actually
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I understood the part of the network of interactions between social ecological systems, but the second one is yes. In some cases, for instance, it was pretty, okay, maybe now I understand. Now, if you're talking about the different social ecological systems between sustainable and conventional farming, which I assume is all about, the different dimensions of the variables, depending. In the case, for instance, of the productivity of the system that I mentioned, it was pretty easy. You have quantitative data on the basis of secondary information. We have a nice table, and we can very easily and straightforwardly say that the productivity of this system is higher, for instance. In the case of different attributes, which was particularly challenging, like the collective rules, for example, which has to do more with how the farmers will come up, obey, follow the rules concerning the farming. It was mostly relying on a number of interviews between the different farmers, and the construction of the certain narrative, if you like, on what were the collective rules in the different setting. So there is no a single table, for instance, that we made at a certain point saying that, okay, system one conventional, and these are the different attributes and how they are expressed. That was system two, sustainable farming, and those were the differences. So on one look, you can immediately have an understanding of what the differences are. Does this address the question?
Yeah. Yes, you can. Barbara posted another question, maybe you can show it. Yeah.
Oh, yes, totally true. Here, that's a very good point. Okay, here you're absolutely right. One of the main problems, if you like, of the whole story of institutional analysis, and if you like, of the whole story, to go back one step, when I was discussing about institutional economics, one of the main criticisms of new institutional economics, because in the classical institutional economics that was not the case, on the contrary, is that you ignore power and power dynamics. And this is totally wrong. That was a major criticism, if you like. No, if you like, that was true. You like it or not, but that was one of the main criticisms concerning Ostrom's work as well, as a whole. It is very interesting that during her late years after the Nobel Prize. It looks like, and it has been argued by many, and that was my impression as well, that she has stepped back a little bit and accepted this argument of basically underplaying the role of power. And many have argued that there were some cases where it looks like she was regretting, ignoring this part, and it was something to be addressed in the following. Now, this division or this criticism, it is still there. Truth to be said, the value, in my view at least, the value of using a quite elaborate framework is that you can indeed incorporate the role of power in many different elements of it. So it is not only the broader setting that I said in the beginning, I mean, the upper part, which between, in the particular case, no, not really. It was not particularly relevant. That's true. But in many other cases, it is super relevant. It is the A and Z of the whole thing. And it is very easy to disregard it by totally ignoring it. Again, going 2 steps back, the same way that mainstream economics say that yes, institutions are important, but we cannot put them in the model, so let's close our eyes and pretend that it is not there. Exactly the same way. So I wouldn't really say, maybe now I'm not 100% fair, but I wouldn't really say that in the new institutional economics school of thought, power dynamics are totally integrated, or in the institutional social ecological system institutional analysis framework, those dynamics are totally integrated. This is one of the reasons why, for instance, many institutional economists actually are quite attracted with the whole discourses of political ecology. And why you will find many both ecological and institutional economists putting power into a prominent, giving it a prominent role. Because again, it is true, and I would argue that in the case that we explored, no, it was not a major concern, at least. But in too many other cases across the world, that's not the case. And it is easy to ignore it. On one hand, again, that's my personal take on the institutional analysis discussion, but the fact that you can use such a detailed and elaborate framework to map what it is going on one hand, it gives you very much flexibility to include and incorporate power concerns in many different attributes, actually, beyond the broader setting. But on the other hand, it makes it particularly easy just to close your eyes and ignore it. After all, you have so many attributes that you can focus. Why to make it even more complicated? So very valid point, what you're saying. I don't really have an answer.
I don't know, maybe social network analysis can help actually to visualize the power relationship within a group of people across different scales. And when you analyze through a network analysis, you are able to understand where is the center of the network, and that is quite close to power. So maybe that could be a good And we realize that network analysis will actually help us to understand not only the structure but how they actually of the dynamics.
That's a good point indeed. And Yeah, because I mean, to a large extent, network analysis can be a part, because every attribute that you're exploring here, you can go to as much depth as you like. So as long as there is even this attribute on networks, yeah, it can even be a separate network analysis dealing with just a single attribute. Yeah, but this is what I was saying, that it's up to the researcher to choose to what depth and what are the attributes that they are very important, which is nice, but risky. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We're basically now over, but I would like to ask a very quick question, Dimitri, which is about the concept of bricolage, because it's being increasingly used a lot in human geography, but not only. No? So,
okay, honestly, a very quick answer here. A few years ago, there was a big discussion. I mean, before joining HTW, while I was still in Humboldt, there was a big discussion, yeah, but it was quite fancy. Let's say 6-7 years ago, yeah. And a colleague of mine was very, very much into it, and that's it, and that's wonderful. And I admit that he didn't convince me. Yeah. So since then, I cannot say in any way that I'm an expert, or maybe I'm totally wrong. Yeah, but this is not something that I worked during the last 5 years or something. So I cannot really answer there. Might be very relevant, might not be. Yeah, I don't want to shoot blindly.
Yeah, the use of the concept is not widespread. I know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we can close here. I don't see any more questions.
Yes, please.
So it's just about, I mean, you show the attributes of STS and shows a very interesting findings on this particular research. And I was thinking about when you say create knowledge and disseminate, and I mean, all the whole learning process is here, right? But I wasn't sure if we were talking about individual learning or collective learning or both of them. And also, to what extent you can consider all this learning and all these achievements as part of the collective activity, which is a very interesting concept. Try to understand not only how, I mean, it's based on how to collect the skill learning with other people, but also how all of them are working together towards a particular target. So,
okay. Here I have to, I mean, my view, and that's my personal, totally personal view on the topic, on the basis of my experiences from research and university and interactions of others, and I admit with the discussions that we have, yeah, being quite complementary, I dare say, in our work, is that on one hand, at the scholars level, I would say, on one hand, you do have an increased discussion on the importance of interdisciplinarity, yeah, and transcending the borders of the disciplines and all this nice talk. And on the other hand, you have every single subdisciplinary field trying to entrench itself to its very narrow borders. So at the end of the day, you end up having two scholars working on something very similar with, yes, a different point of view, for example, but it's like there is an effort that you make it look like it is as different as it could be, while in practice it is not. And in my view, this goes against the very principle of scientific way of thinking and progress, yeah, and how we move onwards and so on. One of the reasons that I personally, again, find institutional analysis so useful is exactly that it allows scholars working on topics, similar topics from different disciplinary views to be able and contribute together equally to this collective thing which is named scientific progress, for example. Again, personally, yeah, it is not as much the value itself, in the sense that, yes, of course, I mean, I find it useful and nice and beautiful and helpful, and especially for students as well, and so on. But it is not that the findings, you cannot reach them otherwise. Yeah, in my view, that's not so much the value. To me, the value, it is exactly about creating knowledge which is not for you and for your very narrow scientific community. Yeah, but it can reach as well others, developing, let's say, an Esperanto of science, if you like. Yeah. Thank you so much. It was really pleasure being again here with all of you, and hopefully see you all again very soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot to everyone online. Hopefully